I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. I have with me Linda Coady that represents the BC Council of Forest Industry, or CoFI. Is that correct,
CoFI for
Linda?
short.
There you
Hi,
go.
Jim.
So we've had that big announcement that came out on Friday from Canadian Forest Products, or CAN4. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's more bad news in a continuing series of closures and curtailments in the BC forest sector that have been going on for a while now. And from the industry's perspective, what we're calling for government to accelerate some of the actions that it's putting in place and processes to stabilize fiber supply in the province as a result.
Yeah, the two press releases, the one from CAN4 seems to be at odds with the one that came from the BC government. The BC government saying that it was, like the CAN4 doesn't want to put up with commodity cycles, and CAN4 saying they can't get access to enough timber. That seems to
Well,
be,
there's well, there has been a downturn in the industry that's been going on for a while, as I just said. But more recently, the critical issue has become access to economic fiber for companies, big and small contractors, right across the whole supply chain in the forest sector. The big issue right now is access to economic fiber. And there's really, two kind of focal areas for that, or two big issues within that. One is the permitting process, and the other is changes that are occurring in land use planning. So we do feel that permitting and regulatory process needs to be improved, and that would help open up more access to fiber or logs. I guess would be a better way to describe it. Logs going to sawmills, and then from the sawmills, the chips from the logs can go to the pulp mills.
yeah, because I have a chart here that I put up earlier. I had an interview with John Rustad this morning. I'm interviewing Kevin Falcon later, and I've reached out to the BC government as well. Finland, in comparison with BC, Finland has 33 million hectares, and BC has like almost triple that, 94 million hectares. Yet their volume of harvest in Finland was 68 million, and BC was 32 million. So, and our forests are quite a bit. Their forests are quite young, and ours are quite old. Maybe you can pull that down now, Jason.
Yeah. Well, it's a different kind of forest that they have in Finland than we have here in British Columbia. They have more plantation forests in Finland than we have here in British Columbia, but there's no doubt, Jim, we could do better. We manage natural forests more here in BC, but there's no doubt that the way that the harvest levels have gone, particularly in the last couple of years, we have an annual allowable cut that's set by the chief forester and is based on scientific and land use planning considerations. That's up at around 60 million in theory, 60 million cubic meters a year, and yet we're only last year harvested, 32 to 35 million out of that. So there's a big gap there in terms of potential. We could definitely be doing more in British Columbia while still raising our standards to meet challenges from climate change and the need to improve protection of biodiversity. There's a lot we could do in BC. We've got
Wouldn't
a
you
big industry here with a lot of talent and equipment and resources.
Wouldn't you think, though, with climate change and with, like the forest fires that we're seeing in British Columbia, that they would want to increase that cut so that we could actually mitigate some of the damage caused by wildfires and put in more natural fire breaks kind of thing?
Yeah, well, certainly the wildfires last year and again the outlook for this year demonstrate the importance of prevention. The industry, forest companies can mobilize equipment and resources and workforce to help with the response to wildfires. But even more importantly, we've got an industry of the size and scope here in BC that could actually help more with the prevention of forest fires. And
Yeah.
so that would be, as you say, in thinning and removing debris. And there's a couple of programs out there for that. The Forest Enhancement Society of BC provides funding for removal of debris and fuel from the forest. And also the Fire Smart program for local community safeguarding provides funding for thinning and removal of debris too. So, but again, this is an area where we could do more to reduce fuel loads, and in the process produce some fiber salvage, some of which could be used in pulp mills, but some of which, if you remove it, means the area of the wildfire will recover even faster
Mm-hmm.
from a biodiversity and a conservation and a water quality point of view, if you get in there and you can remove some of that salvage wood. So yeah, there's definite upsides to prevention.
What do you think the stumbling blocks are for that? Because that seems to make common sense. I mean, I worked for Canfor a long time ago for 10 years, and I've been in the sawmill industry. And I understood, like, the part of the sawmilling part, but like not the forestry management part. Like, why aren't they doing more to mitigate or like manage the forest better?
Well, it's going to be with the wildfires, it does mean a change in approach to forest management. It's a different kind of silviculture. It also means you probably plant different types of trees and you space them differently. But I think, one of the obstacles in the short term has just been the availability of funding and investment to invest in those types of activities. And as I said, the Forest Enhancement Society of BC is providing $60 million over the next 3 years for that. Companies are also doing more. So it's starting to happen. But what we've got to find is end use for the fiber or the fuel that we're pulling out of the forest. So
Right.
that means making more biomaterials. So yes, pulp and paper, but beyond that, what else can be, the world has big demand for renewable products. What other kind of products can we make from biomaterials? Looking at those kinds of opportunities. So, it's a big issue. It's a big issue in California, Oregon, Colorado. There are new approaches emerging now, or new technologies. You can take fuel from the forest floor, debris and wood, and make it right directly into hydrogen if you can reduce, eliminate the carbon from it. So energy, biofuels, those opportunities are there for British Columbia in the future if we can get going on the transition that's underway right now.
I'm reading your recent economic impact of BC's forest sector, and it seems to, I think, you can probably see it there, right? There's a lot of jobs in BC in forestry.
Yeah, the combined direct and indirect, about 100,000. We lost 10,000 last year in 2023. And
Wow.
that's why industry, government, labor, First Nations, local communities, we've really got to come together now and reverse this trajectory and make sure that we can
Put
perform
up that second one.
at a higher level, yeah, and eliminate that gap between the annual allowable cut and the actual cut. Now, some of it is, does depend on market conditions. It's not just what we can do here, but that's more of a long run thing.
Right. Okay. And then there's that one last chart there, Jason. If you can put it on my side, though, and cover up Linda's face there. Well, you can leave it like that. That's fine. It's the one there that shows the forest products rank second to energy as BC's leading export. So it's that important. You can probably pull that down, Jason. That's a pretty big industry then for British Columbia.
Yeah, it's a big it's always been a big industry. I mean, we've had mega projects the last couple of years in British Columbia that have generated a lot of jobs, like Site C and LNG Canada. But underneath that, that resource economy, of which forestry, energy, mining, agriculture, they're all core staples of that economy. That it's really important in British Columbia. And certainly from an exports point of view, areas or jurisdictions that export more than they import tend to have better economies. So that's, it makes a big difference, the amount of forest manufactured products that we export from BC.
What does that mean to those people that live in those communities now, Bear Lake, CoFI, Houston, and I think there's one curtailment in the PG mill there as well?
Yeah, well, obviously, it's the biggest impact is on those communities and those workers. And so it does mean fewer jobs, it reduces average pay levels, it reduces tax revenues to local governments, and it reduces, exports and revenues to the province. So it's a big hit, and it's something that none of us like to see. And hopefully there are some solutions on the table so that we can address the permitting issues, get some of the new land use planning processes up and running faster, and enter into new agreements with First Nations. I think that's also a big part of the way forward here.
Because Canfor said it's postponing its new mill. It didn't say it was not doing it. It said it's postponing. And they cut back a shift. And even when I worked back in the mill industry a long time ago, like that happened quite a few times with commodity cycles and that for sure. But then the Bear Lake one, if they close that one, is that one closed permanently, or is that something that could come back? Or
Yes, my understanding it's closed permanently.
that's
And
sad,
they've
yeah.
suspended, and you should talk to Canfor about this, but my understanding is they've suspended their investment in a new mill in Houston. That's a $200 million investment, and it's 200 jobs there that
Yeah,
would
and
that would be
Canfor
created
was,
as a result of that investment. Yeah.
and Canfor is a pretty big BC company too, right? BC, kind of like that's their base, right? That's where they started.
Yeah, their head office is here in British Columbia. They do have operations elsewhere in the world, in the U.S. and more recently in Europe. But they're a real flagship BC forest company. Absolutely, they're important
Yeah, I
here
worked
in
in their
British Columbia.
Alberta mill way up in High Level there a long time ago, but they've
Yeah,
since
yeah,
sold
and
that.
in Alberta too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
not something we like to see, and this is a situation we've got to turn around here in BC, but it's going to take everybody working together to do it. So if you're talking to the politicians, see if we can get everybody to agree.
right.
There are some solutions on the table. We've just got to mobilize around them.
Well,
The government did appoint a special minister, Minister Mercier, who you may be interviewing later, to look at stabilizing what can be done to stabilize the fiber supply. And we are calling on the government to accelerate the work that he's been doing.
10,000 jobs, you said early in this interview. 10,000 jobs lost last year alone.
Yes, that's right. That's in that economic impact report that you've got there.
10,000 jobs and good paying jobs, forest industry.
Good paying jobs. 5,000 of those are direct and 5,000 are indirect or induced. So through supply chains and other local economic
Yeah.
activities that depend on it. So yeah, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of change happening. There's a lot at stake, and we need to agree on how to move forward. There are some solutions on the table, like I say, but we got to get going on them.
Yeah. Is that the message that you want to share? Just like we got to step on the gas and make sure something happens?
Yes, that's the message. Yes, absolutely. You should ask them about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the
Okay.
time for, I go back to wildfires. I mean, if that's one of our most critical issues, or climate change, then why don't we act faster in this and actually deal with two problems at once?
Yeah, there's an opportunity. Yeah, there's definitely a coalescence. The solutions around wildfire prevention and fiber utilization, community safety, and biodiversity recovery. They're all coming together here. And so it looks like we could have a couple of solutions that work on all those fronts. So that's another big opportunity for us moving forward. And the Premier did set up a task force on emergency response. And I think that some of those recommendations are coming in right now too. So I think you will see more
Right.
emphasis on that kind of convergence that's happening. Yeah.
Again, it makes common sense that we spend the money on harvesting than spending it on fighting fires and it just going into the atmosphere. I mean, it makes
Well, and
sense to me.
and the utilization of products too, like the thinning, especially if you do pre-commercial thinning in forestry, you can get wood that's suitable for manufactured wood products from that in some instances. And we have a housing crisis in Canada. We have new types of building materials like mass timber and other engineered wood products green building system, prefab, offsite building. There's a big demand for all of these kinds of products now. And British Columbia is uniquely, able to respond to some of that demand. So, the longer term outlook is, on the demand side looks good. What we've got right now is a problem on the supply side.
Sounds like we have the forestry industry has a really good roller skate, and the government has the key.
Okay. Yes, that would be another way of looking at it. Yeah.
An old song, right? I'll leave you with that, though. I thank you for your time.
Good line. Okay, thank you.
And I'll send you the link to this story, and then the other ones that we're doing. We're going to do quite a few interviews on this and see if we can help shed some light on this.
Yeah, well, keep us in your loop. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks for watching Kelowna Now.